So today we're going to do another deck preview. We're going to take a look at some cards that have not yet been released. And those cards are Dark Spellcasters. So we got some brand new boss monsters, which is quite rare for Spellcasters. Spellcasters typically, for the longest time, only really had 7's Road Magician and has slowly gotten more over time. And we've finally got some new ones. So this is the Sword Dawn Magician. So it's got 2500 attack, 1500 defense. If your opponent has more face-up level 7 or higher monsters on their field than the number of monsters on your field, you can special summon this card from your hand face-up to your field. That means if your opponent has 3 level 7 or higher monsters, you can just summon this even if you already have 2 other monsters because your opponent just has that many high-level monsters. If your opponent only has the 1 level 7 or higher monster, you can special summon this card only if you have no other monsters on the field. But its continuous effect is if you have 6 or more spell cards in your graveyard, this card cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Now that's not a terrible effect. It's not bonkers, but it does protect you from things like Dark Hole and things like Mirror Force, which is pretty good. The only downside is that it caps out at 2500 attack, and that is not a huge number. It's not a bad number by any stretch. 2500 is kind of the sweet spot you want to be at, but it's not exactly an unkillable boss monster that we'd like it to be. But the other new boss monster we got does have a bit more attack, and that is our Obsidian Magical Soldier. So again, 2500 attack base, 1400 defense, but another continuous effect. This card gains attack equal to the number of spell cards in your graveyard times 100. That means if we just get 1 or 2 spell cards in there, he suddenly becomes 26, 27, which is a much better number because now 25s can't crash into it. And if we have 5 or more spell cards in our graveyard, he gains 500 more attack, which means if we get 5 spell cards in graveyard, he'll gain 1000 attack, pushing him all the way up to 3500, which is not a bad number. That will make it bigger than some maximums. But again, if we get any more spell cards, so for example, if we manage to get 10 spell cards in the graveyard, he'll go all the way up to 4000 attack, which is straight up maximum attack value. So really, really good card. With some drawbacks. Now, you might have noticed that both of these cards do have a little bit of a problem, which is neither of them destroy monsters, neither of them have piercing, neither of them can attack directly, and neither of them can gain multi-attacks, which is the weakness of this deck. These cards are really good, just kind of strong bodies, but they don't do anything unfair. And I think that's probably the main issue this deck's going to have going forward, is that we don't have a great way to get to our opponent's life points, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. For our legend, we've gone with Dark Magician. We have got a little bit of extra Dark Magician support in this set, so we thought we would give him a go, and so far we've been doing quite well with this. It also works really nicely with another new card we got, Mature Dark Magician. So we can send a Dark Attribute Spellcaster monster from our hand to the graveyard, draw 1 card. That in itself is pretty good. Then you can special summon Dark Magician from your graveyard face up to your field. So again, if we can just keep getting Dark Magician in the graveyard, we can bring it back with this card, and we can also bring it back with our Legend Strike, because obviously Dark Magician is a normal legend monster. So going through the rest of the monsters, we have 3 7's Road Sorcerer. This is in here because it is a Dark Spellcaster, that's the primary reason, but we can use its effect to cheat back out a monster. Being able to bring back a monster that can't be destroyed by card effects, or a monster that can gain a ton of attack, can be extremely relevant, or we can bring back Dark Magician to turn on things like our 1000 Knives, which is our card of choice to get to our opponent's life points. Next up, we have Darkness Force Seeker, which is if you have 3 or more Dark Attribute Spellcaster monsters in different levels in your graveyard, send the top 4 cards of the deck to the graveyard. This turn you can only attack with Dark Attribute Spellcaster monsters. So again, this deck really wants to be filling our graveyard. We want Dark Magician in the graveyard so we can bring it back with Mature, so we can bring it back with Legend Strike. We want our other boss monsters in the graveyard so we can bring them back with something like 7's Road Sorcerer. We want our Legend Magicians in the graveyard again so we can bring them back with something like Legend Strike. And we want just all these spellcasters in the graveyard to fuel our Dark Revelation, which is kind of the linchpin of the deck. This is kind of the main protection that the deck has. Next up, Legend Magician, just all around fantastic card, and it's a spellcaster, so it works quite nicely in this deck. It's, again, always going to be fantastic. We want to be milling cards, it's the right type for the deck, and obviously it has incredible synergy with something like Legend Strike. Next up, we're on Magic Mirror Youth. So this is a light spellcaster, the same as our Legend Magician. And its effect is during your main phase that you normal or special summon this card, place 1 card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. Add 1 level 4 spellcaster monster from your graveyard to your hand. So this effect can be really useful because we can use it to get back a Legend Magician if we feel like we just need to keep digging. We can use it to get back Darkness Force Seeker, again if we feel like we need to just mill a ton of cards. Or we can get back 7's Road Sorcerer, which we can use to go into one of our big boss monsters. But the other thing is this is a light monster, which means it's perfect to be used with our Charis Magic Elegant Change. So this spell card is meant to be in the Celebros deck, but we've decided to use it in here because we felt like the deck needed a little bit more consistency. So we can send a light attribute spellcast type monster or an equipped spell card. So again, we don't have any equipped, so it's literally, we have to send one of our 6 light spellcaster type monsters to the graveyard, draw 1 card, then if you have 4 or more monsters in your graveyard, draw 1 additional card. So ideally we want to just be drawing 2 cards off of this. And we do have 6 targets for it, which is pretty good, but also using our Dark Revelations, we'll be able to keep shuffling them back into our deck, thus making this live a lot of the time. Next up, we're on 1 copy of Peaking Magician. This could be anything. This could maybe be Barrier Statue, but we're trying out Peaking Magician just because an extra mill is useful, and it is an extra level 3 Dark, which is really good for Darkness Forseeker since we need 3 or more Dark Attribute spellcasters with different levels. And we only have the 3 3s without it, so this gives us 4 3s, this gives us 6 4s, and this gives us 7 7s. Finally, we're on Amazing Dealer. If you have 3 or less monsters in your graveyard, pay 300 life points, send 3 cards from your hand to the graveyard, draw 3 cards. This is in here again, it's a spellcaster, so it has some synergy. It's really, really good early if we just open a load of brick or our hand doesn't really do anything. We can discard 3, draw 3, and then tribute it off to get out one of our big boss monsters, which is usually a very strong open. So Thousand Knives, we spoke a little bit about this before, but this deck really struggles to get your opponent's life points, and it does struggle to get over really, really big things. That's why we're on 2 copies of Thousand Knives. This deck does tend to mill through its contents quite quickly, thus making Dark Magician available quite a lot because we have a lot of ways to bring it back between Mature, Dark Magician, and our Legend Strike. Thousand Knives is a great out to deal with big problematic boards that we can't chew through, and also we can get rid of defense monsters out the way so we can get to our opponent's life points, and this has come up several times. Next up, 3 Ship of the 7 Treasures. All of our big boss monsters are level 7, and this card is obviously fantastic anyway because we can discard any monster, but it's even better with level 7s, so just always going to be a fantastic consistency tool. Again, Charis Magic Elegant Change is our other consistency tool in here. We also want to be on a high number of spell cards because, again, we want to be hitting the 5+ for our Obsidian Magic Sorcerer and our 6+ for our Sword Dawn Magician to get their continuous effects off. Next up, Legend Strike. Again, really fantastic card. This acts as our back row hate, also gets back our Dark Magician, and it's just extra bodies to be used to tribute summons, so always going to be a fantastic card. Then we're on Dark Hole. So this card could be anything. This could be Monster Reborn, because that works quite well in this deck. It could be Graceful Charity. Again, that'll get through our deck, which is what we want. We want to be drawing as many cards as we can and trying to get as many good cards in the graveyard as possible. But Dark Hole helps us really deal with gummy board states that we otherwise can't deal with. If our opponent just summons a giant guy or 3 giant guys, this deck can just kind of bash through it, but very, very slowly, whereas Dark Hole can just kind of clear the way and give us a good way to just try and get to our opponent. So it's always going to be a really good kind of panic card, and because of that, it's always going to be really, really strong. And Dark Hole on its own can sometimes just win games. Finally, we have our 3 Dark Revelation. Again, fantastic. It's 3 copies of Mirror Force, so who wouldn't want that? Chucking your spellcasters back into your deck so you can keep reusing them for different effects. We can throw our level 7s back in so we can use Ship of the 7 Treasures. We can send our light monsters back in to be used with our Elegant Change. And just being able to threaten your opponent's board at all times is really, really powerful. When your opponent sees that you're on spellcasters, they will immediately assume that you're on 3 copies of Dark Revelation and then start playing around it by keeping some of their monsters in defense mode, which can just take the pressure off a little bit. And then finally, we're on Mirror Force again. Mirror Force is a very, very powerful card at the moment because a lot of players are not playing the more explosive decks. Obviously, if you're playing against something like 7's Wonder Fusion Turbo or Light Galaxy, you'd probably be siding into something like Magic Cylinder. If your opponent's playing something that can mess with your back row, like Gaia or like Harpies, or anything that turns off your combat traps like the Sea Serpent Maximums, that's when we will side into our Torrential Tribute. But other than that, Mirror Force is a really good catch-all that's generally good against a lot in the meta. So again, this extra deck does not matter. We were testing out a 7's Wonder Fusion version of this deck, but we found that this was a lot more enjoyable, so we've kind of gone with this. But the side deck, these are all the cards that we were just kind of testing out. So we were trying out the 3000 Knives, but again, if we see our 1000 Knives before we see our Dark Magician, it's just kind of a dead card, so we don't really want to brick on it. Dark Magic Attack is really, really good if your opponent is on a very back row heavy deck. I probably wouldn't side in more than one of this, but it's still a good card nonetheless. This is another new card that, again, we were testing out alongside Dark Magician Girl. This is Jewel of the Dark Magician. We can special summon a Dark Attribute Spellcast type monster with 2500 attack and or 1 Dark Attribute Spellcast type monster with 2000 attack from your hand or your graveyard face up to your field. So this card's really, really good in general. We can get out our 2500 attack monsters, which is all of our level 7 monsters. But we're not running any 2000 attack monsters to make use of the other effect. The other problem is this deck is already quite tight for space in the spell traps. We don't really want to get rid of any of our trap lineup because this is all kind of the core of the deck. And as for our spells, we want to go for our back row hate in Legend Strike, which also just works really well with everything else. We want all of our consistency cards and we need all of our outs to problematic cards, which means Jewel of the Dark Magician struggles to find room. I think there will probably be a future version of this deck where we do incorporate this card, but for now we're going to keep it in the side deck. We've got 2 Magical Stream, again, just more back row hate. We have the Dark Resonance Burst. Again, this is a holdover from when we were playing Dark Magician Girl in here, but this card still can be relevant. Gaining extra attack can be really good and help you break some boards. Next up, Darkness Road. Now this card's quite an interesting one. We were using this quite a lot. While this card is face up in the field zone, face up level 5 or higher dark attribute spellcast hit monsters on the field, gain 400 attack, lose 1500 defense. So all of our monsters' defense kind of sucks anyway, so we don't really care about the defense. But gaining that 400 attack is quite good. That makes most of our guys up to something around 2900 attack. And 2900 attack is decent, but it's not 3000, and that actually comes up quite a lot. The amount of times that we've been staring down 3000 attack monsters with our 29s is actually kind of a little bit frustrating, but it does make our Obsidian Magic Soldier very, very big because he can easily reach kind of 4000 attack with this field spell up. The main reason we brought this in was when we were playing against a large number of like dark lurkers, and we just wanted a way to beat over them because our 2500 attacks don't quite get there, but 29 does. And then finally, we have our last 2 traps, which we have already spoken about. So this deck is very fun. I think that is the main takeaway. I don't think this is going to be a hyper competitive deck, but maybe we'll be able to come up with a build later on in the future which can make better use of these. But this deck can hold its own. We can summon out consistently big monsters, we can constantly threaten boards, and between our removal cards, we always have ways to try and contest your opponent's board no matter how strong it is. The other thing to take note of is that this is a deck preview, which means the entire set has not been released yet. We do not know if we'll be getting more Spellcaster support or Dark Magician specific support in the future, but this is the best that I've managed to come up with so far. And again, so far, really, really enjoying the deck. I just don't think this is quite like tournament worthy yet. But let's fire in some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.